disruptive.
America that I fought for.
Weird thing to happen. Hello, one and all. Welcome to this edition of Kitz Corner. Been a fantastic day so far. Keith Olbermann is back, ladies and gentlemen. The crazy kook, Looney Tune, screamaholic Keith Olbermann is apparently making his rounds again and making an absolute ass of himself. Because not only has he attacked pretty much everybody who's not 100% kissing his ass, everybody who, has a different opinion or actually has, real integrity to help one another, he has not screamed and vilified and demonized and attacked. He is now going after Cornel West because Cornel West, being an intellect and has actually studied and researched about topics at hand and political discourse, and when it comes to foreign affairs, Keith Olbermann has attacked him for it. So it started with this. So Cornel West is talking about how right now Ukraine is on the deal to sign with NATO. That is what's happening right now, and all the countries are now gathering together to try to pressure Zelensky to accept this deal and align themselves to this organization, something that we should not have done in the first place, and we have violated every measure of a peace agreement to never allow this to happen. It's now happening. And this is one of the reasons why Russia did what they did, was because we had a peace agreement that NATO was not allowed to expand into the territories of Russia. Well, now that's expanding itself further and further, and now they're trying to get Ukraine involved in this. It is just getting worse and worse. So Cornel West points out that let us not be deceived. NATO is an expanding instrument of U.S. global power that provoked Russia into a criminal invasion and occupation of Ukraine. This proxy war between the American Empire and the Russian Federation could lead to World War III. We must stop the war and war crimes, including cluster bombs used by all parties, and embarked on diplomatic talks that should lead to a just peace. As the great W.E.B. Du Bois wrote in 1945, I seem to be outlined a third world war based on the suppression of Asia and the strangling of Russia. The Democratic Party is a party of war and Wall Street targeting Russia and China. Let us save our democracy and world by dismantling U.S. militarism at home, as in cop cities and abroad, as Martin Luther King Jr. painfully reminded us. So that is an intellect who has actually studied on what this war is about and knows the history, knows the fundamentals of how this war empire catastrophically manufactured this war and, ignited an attack from Russia. They planned for Russia to attack into Ukraine to allow this war to happen, because not only was it inevitable with the history that we know about Ukraine and know about NATO and their involvement and how the United States overthrew their democratically elected government to install a puppeteer dictatorship, align themselves with neo-Nazis. Not only that, but as Julian Assange has reminded us, just like we did with Afghanistan, just we allowed ourselves with Syria and Libya and Iraq and Iran and all these other countries, the purpose of these wars is to manufacture them so that war profiteers can make a quick buck off the bloodshed and tyranny of oppressing these nations. It has nothing to do with peace. It has nothing to do with democracy. Everybody knows it at this point. But there's still people that are sucked in to this propaganda fear-mongering to think that Russia is the only bad person in this argument. People like Keith Olbermann, who has been sucked for years into the Russiagate hysteria and Trump derangement syndrome. Of course, he responds to Cornel West, who made an excellent point. He told him to go F off. A journalist is telling an intellect to go F off. Not F off, here's some counteracting points that I can actually provide you context with. No, just F off. Because Keith Olbermann has no argument to this. Cornel West is 100% spot on. He's 100% correct. Keith Olbermann has no response to it other than telling him to shut up. F off. He's telling intellect to go F off. That's Keith Olbermann for you. That's the mind rotting of Russiagate. That's the mind rot of the Trump derangement syndrome happening in full force. That you don't have a compelling argument to go against an intellect like Cornel West, that you just have to scream at your top of your lungs and hope that it goes away. That somehow Cornel West is part of this imaginary boogeyman that you manufactured inside your head. I also love how Brianna Joy Gray, who does a lot of podcasting, she did that Bernie podcast, and now she has her own. She does a lot of great work. She says, "I'm happy to discuss your nuanced take on this issue on Bad Faith Podcast anytime." I know that Keith Olbermann won't, because again, he has no argument, but hey, you have an invitation now. If you're against this and you have a different viewpoint, why not express it? Let's discuss this like rational adults. And of course, I know that Keith Olbermann is probably not going to tell her to F off, because, you know, that's discriminatory against a black lady. But a black intellect, it's okay to tell him to F off when he's factually correct on things. So then, that's leading into this. So right now, they're signing the deal to get onto NATO. And like I said, all the international leaders are gathering together. All the NATO-aligned leaders are gathering together to rally Ukraine to sign on with NATO, to violate every peace accord and every peace agreement they had to not sign with NATO that allowed a kind of buffer zone between Russia and the West, has now completely just dismantled, has now completely broke and violated every single term, and as criminality going against the Russian Federation. And here's this is Melanie Joy, one of the cabinet ministers, who is a notorious warmonger here in Canada. And here's what she had to say about this historic agreement that Ukraine's going to sign with NATO.
Allow and when the war ends. So how do you define when the war ends? Do you mean by that, for example, every Russian soldier will be outside of Ukraine's borders, including Crimea?
So, first and foremost, we always have said that it is important that we help Ukrainians fight as we speak. Why? Because one day there will be a negotiation table. One day there will be a diplomatic solution to this war, as in any war. And so that's why we need to be able to continue to support Ukrainians, to increase eventually also their, their leverage at the negotiation table. And that's why the counteroffensive that is happening right now is so.
If they ever write a playbook for warmongering 101, that's definitely it. They're waving the carrot of peace right in front of your nose, but they're never going to do it. That's the thing. She's saying one day there's going to be diplomatic solution. One day we're actually going to get peace. One day this is going to actually phase out and we can actually get back to normalcy. But it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. Why? Because we've already seen diplomatic solutions trying to implement between Ukraine and Russia. They want a diplomatic end of this conflict. They want to talk it out. They want to have a peace agreement. But you know who doesn't want it? NATO. You know who else doesn't want it? The United States military empire. Same with Canada. Same with every other war power country that wants this to happen so they can kill and destroy Russia and kill Ukrainians in cannon fodder. They want this war to continue on. As Julian Assange always reminds us, it's a continuous war. It's not an ending the war. They don't want this war to end. That's why they're going to dangle this carrot for the longest time of, oh, we're going to have peace someday. Maybe. But of course, peace comes with bullet power. Peace comes with drone attacks. Peace comes with, obliterating schools and hospitals and, throwing children's body parts around. That's how we get peace. That's how we get diplomacy, by attacking one another instead of actually getting to the table and talking this through like grown-ass adults. Because who would want that? Certainly not the military contractors that are making trillions of dollars off this. And again, just to remind people who this lady is, she was notorious for saying that Moscow needs a regime change. She said this openly. She said this openly as a Canadian, as a peacekeeper Canadian, that we just need to storm into Russia, overthrow their government, install our version of a government that we can dominate over the economic situation of Russia and control basically the global hemisphere. That's what she admitted out loud that the National Post is reporting. She just revealed the game. That I thought this was about, saving Ukrainians. I thought this was about saving democracy and protecting the innocent civilians that were crushed by this Russian authoritarianism, the war crimes that they committed. Oh, wait, it was actually, trying to dismantle Russia's economy so that the United States and the West can be the global hedge power of the world. It's really about nefarious ploy, just like every other war. Yeah, exactly. Canadians politicians don't want to recognize that the current Russian policy is supported by the ultimate majority of the nation. Just to point that out, that majority of Russians and majority of Ukrainian people support Vladimir Putin and support the Russian Federation. In fact, the reason why Russia intervened so much is because there was a civil war in the Donbass region. There's a civil war in the Crimea region, and the Ukrainians that primarily side with Russia culturally and with their language have relations with the Russian country, and they were getting attacked by the Ukrainian Nazis that we knew we were funding in the whole part of this. We were funding, and we acknowledged that we were funding it. So Russia came in to defend the people of Ukraine that were primarily more Russian than siding with the neo-Nazis of Ukraine. So that's another thing that they're not telling you that ignited this, alongside all the mishandlings of global powers and the fact that the military contractors and NATO broke every single peace agreement to not allow this to try to divert this from happening. Again, it's a manufactured war. That's all this is. It's a manufactured war. They wanted Russia to intervene, and they got their wish, and now they're getting further and further into their wish. All the warlords are gathering together to sign this declaration that Ukraine could possibly join NATO, and it's just going to dismantle the entire globe. Because Cornel West was definitely spot on by saying that it is exactly an instrument tool of U.S. war power. It is a global domination tool used for expanding militarily while destroying our own empire internally. Because as they're trying to sign NATO and send all this money to Ukraine, saying that we're going to destroy Russia and we're going to globally take over the world, bridges and streets in America and here in Canada are crumbling. We are seeing a homelessness epidemic. We are seeing our healthcare systems, our institutions are deteriorating because of lack of resources. We are killing ourselves by doing these suicide runs for Ukraine by doing this. And Cornel West is spot on. And Keith Olbermann, who's supposedly this fantastic journalist from the mainstream media, definitely spot on and has the proven narrative, just told him to go F off. Because he has no argument. Just unbelievably laughable, really.
This segment of Kitz's Corner is sponsored by CBD Oil, Canada's most trusted source for high-quality lab-tested natural therapeutic products for people and pets. Whether it's treating pain, anxiety, insomnia, or just looking to live a more vital life, there's a therapeutic solution for you. Use the link below and get free express shipping with purchases over $150. This